The soldiers stared at the sky as the shuttle landed with a loud hiss. Dust rose into the hot air, and the dry wind of planet Khazar carried it across the military outpost. The 30 human soldiers had been fighting for weeks now. They were tired. Dirty and wounded, they expected new weapons, backup fighters or heavy machines. But what came out of the shuttle made them blink in shock. 3 alien women stepped down slowly. They wore white robes that moved gently in the wind. Each had glowing skin-soft blue, pale green, and bright silver. Their eyes were calm, and their hands carried small bags, not weapons. Captain Briggs narrowed his eyes and stepped forward. "You're the support we've been waiting for?" he asked, his voice hard. The tallest of the 3 nodded. "My name is Alira," she said softly. "We are nurses from the Tralnari system." "Sent to heal your wounded?" Some soldiers laughed quietly in the back. Private Holt whispered, "Great." "Now we get babysitters," Corporal Danvers added. "They'll be gone in a day." But Alira, Vexa, and Rooney didn't seem to hear the comments. They moved straight to the injured, their hands glowing faintly. The first soldier they touched groaned as his broken leg began to shift back into place. Another, with a deep burn, gasped as cool light wrapped around his arm. The healing was fast, clean, and left no scars. Captain Briggs watched carefully. These women were strange to calm for a war zone, too soft for a battlefield full of blood. That night, something strange happened. A silent alarm rang across the camp. Movement was seen beyond the walls. Briggs ran to the tower. Grabbing his rifle, he looked through the scope. Nothing. Then he saw it. A creature, huge, shadowy, with claws-like blades, moved quickly toward. The perimeter soldiers rushed into position, shouting orders, but before anyone fired, Alira walked out of the barracks. She didn't run, didn't scream. She stepped outside the gate alone. The soldiers yelled, "Get back!" But she ignored them. The beast charged, roaring. Alira raised her hand, calm as ever, for a moment. Everything froze. Then a bright flash lit up the camp. The creature fell mid-run silent. Still and lifeless, not a single drop of blood came. From it, not a scratch was seen on Alira. She turned back, her voice quiet. "It won't return." Silence filled the base. Even the wind seemed to stop. Captain Briggs met her eyes. What was that? He asked, not just about the beast, but about her. Alira simply said, "We are here to help, in more ways than one." That night, no one slept well. Some soldiers whispered that she had powers. Others said she had tech hidden under her skin. But one thing was clear. These 3 alien nurses were not what they seemed. Vexa fixed the camp's water system the next morning without touching a single tool. She placed her hand on the control panel and whispered something in her native tongue. Suddenly, the machines came back to life. Clean water flowed again after being dry for days. Rooney moved among the soldiers, learning their names. Her soft smile made even the grumpiest man lower his gun. But she was the quietest of all. She watched everything, as if waiting for something. When night fell again, everyone stayed inside. But Alira sat alone on a crate, eyes to the dark forest beyond the walls. Briggs walked up and sat beside her. "You don't seem scared," he said. "I've seen worse." She replied, "What else can you do?" He asked. She looked at him with glowing eyes. "That depends on how bad things get." He didn't ask more. Somehow, he knew she wouldn't answer. In the shadows, something else moved, watching the camp. It had seen the flash, felt the power. And it was not afraid, it was curious. Deep inside the jungle, other things began to wake up. Hungry things, old things. Planet Khazar was not quiet anymore. And the 3 alien nurses were not just healers. They were something more, something ancient. Something deadly when needed. The soldiers didn't know it yet, but these women were their last hope, and soon. They would face a war far worse than they had imagined. The wind on planet Khazar was always whispering, but that morning it carried more than dust, it carried questions. No one knew what Alira had done the night before. The soldiers only knew the creature that scared them all was now a pile of cold. Ash and the alien nurse who faced it alone didn't even have a scratch on her skin. Private Holt couldn't stop staring at her as she passed by. He muttered, "She's not normal." Corporal Danvers agreed. "She's hiding something." While the others whispered and wondered, Vexa was crouched beside the radar tower. The tower had been broken since the last storm, fried from the inside. No human engineer could fix it, but Vexa didn't even open the control box. She just placed both her hands on the metal, closed her eyes, and began to hum softly. The hum traveled like a song, and the wires inside moved like they were alive. The screen flickered once, then glowed green. The radar came back to life. Captain Briggs watched from a distance. Arms crossed, jaw tight. He had led troops in 5 sectors, seen aliens, seen tech, seen weapons, but he had never seen something like this. No tools, no wires, no effort, just her hands and a quiet sound. It made him uneasy in the mess hall. Rooney sat quietly at a table, her silver eyes scanning the room. She didn't speak unless spoken to. But when a young soldier came in, limping and bleeding from a drill injury, she stood and walked to him without a word. She reached for his shoulder. Her touch light, and within seconds the wound closed. No pain, no scar. The soldier stared at her, mouth open. "You're like magic," he said. Rooney only smiled gently and went back to her seat. That night, as the sun vanished and the moons rose, a signal came through the radar. It was not a friendly one. Captain Briggs rushed to the control room, alarms flashing red. "Incoming heat signatures, well love them, fast," the tech shouted. The jungle outside the walls looked calm, but the scanners saw movement. Not beasts this time, not wild things. These were trained, armored, and carrying weapons. The soldiers snapped into position, loading their rifles and checking their suits. They had fought off raids before, but not without losses. They expected the nurses to hide again, instead. All 3 stood beside Briggs at the command post. "We can help," Alira said calmly. Briggs looked at her, still unsure. "How?" he asked. She answered by pointing to the tower. "I'll take the left side," Vexa said, already climbing the ladder like she'd done it before. "I'll go to the gate," said Rooney, walking with quiet steps. Alira turned to Briggs. "You will see what we truly are." The first blast hit the outer wall, shaking the camp. Dust flew into the air, and shouting filled the space. The enemies were fast, wearing cloaks that made them hard to see. But as they ran toward the camp, a strange force pushed them back. One was lifted into the air, spun violently, then dropped like a rag. Alira stood just inside the wall, arms raised, her fingers glowing. Each movement of her hand sent waves of energy into the air. The enemies screamed, confused, their weapons jamming, their eyes wide with fear. On the tower, Vexa was whispering to the system, and the broken turrets began to wake up with no human touching them. They turned and aimed with perfect accuracy. Every shot found its target. Near the gate, Rooney stepped out, facing 2 cloaked raiders. They fired energy darts at her, but they vanished mid-air, like swallowed by something unseen. Then she lifted her hand slowly, and the air bent around her fingers. The 2 raiders collapsed instantly, not dead, but frozen in time, inside the base. Every soldier stood still, watching. None of them had fired a single shot. None of them had even been hurt. Captain Briggs took off his helmet, walking up to Alira as the smoke cleared. "They were trained assassins," he said, voice low. "I know," she replied. "You didn't kill them all," he added, looking at the survivors lying unconscious outside the fence. "They will speak of this," Alira answered, "and their leaders will wonder if it's worth coming back." Briggs nodded slowly, still trying to understand. Why were we sent nurses? He finally asked. Alira looked up at the sky, where more clouds were gathering. Because this planet is worse than you think, she said, and you are not just fighting raiders in the jungle. Far beyond where any radar reached, something. Ancient opened its eyes. It had been asleep for a long, long time, but the presence of alien energy had stirred it. And now it was awake. Alira, Vexa, and Rooney had known this day would come. The real enemy was not human, not beast, not even visible. Yet, but it was coming. And the humans, whether they knew it or not, were not ready, not without them. The camp lights flickered once, then went out completely. Only the moonlight touched the tents and the quiet soldiers standing in confusion. It was supposed to be a normal night. Routine patrols, quiet meals, nothing special, but something felt wrong even before the alarm was raised. Jack had just finished his shift when he heard the soft footsteps that didn't belong. He looked over his shoulder but saw nothing, just the edge of the jungle, dark and breathing. Private Lane was on the outer post near the water station. He radioed once, said everything was clear. 5 minutes later, when the next check-in came, there was only silence. Griggs ordered a search team to fan out. 6 soldiers ran toward the post. Calling Lane's name, they found his gun lying in the grass, and nothing else. No blood, no signs of a fight, just ... Absence. His helmet light was still blinking, tossed near a small crater. Back at camp, tension spread fast. Griggs stood over the map table with a deep frown. "We've lost a man without a trace," he said. "That doesn't happen." Then someone asked the question, "Where's Vexa?" Eyes turned toward the nurse's tent. The flap was open. The space inside, empty. Vexa was gone. A ripple of suspicion hit the soldiers like cold rain. They remembered the powers, the strange healing, the broken radar that she fixed with her hands. Some remembered the way she looked at them, calm, quiet, unreadable. Now she was missing, and so was one of their own. Jack stood up, heart beating fast. "She wouldn't do that," he said quickly. "She saved Rico. She fought for us." But even his voice shook a little. Griggs didn't argue. He simply ordered 2 squads to track both missing figures. The scanners were brought online. But they showed strange interference. Something was jamming the signal. The jungle swallowed the men as they spread out. Jack joined the search party moving west. The trees felt tighter, the wind louder, and the air colder than usual after 20 minutes of searching. They found something. A glowing mark burned into a tree. Shaped like a spiral, Jack touched it, pulsed once under his glove. Then faded. They moved quietly now, weapons ready. Then came the sound. A branch cracked, followed by a heavy thud. The soldiers raised their rifles, fingers on triggers, but from the shadows. Vexa stepped forward, carrying something over her shoulder. It was Lane, unconscious, his uniform torn, his leg bent at a wrong angle. Jack rushed forward. What happened? Vexa's face was pale, her suit scratched and torn. He was taken by a stalker beast. She said, her voice weak. "I followed it, fought it, got away." The soldiers hesitated. Unsure whether to believe her, one of them muttered, "No." One else saw it. Jack looked into Vexa's eyes. They were tired, haunted, not cold like a liar's. She laid Lane down gently on the stretcher. "I told you," Jack said, turning toward the others. She saved him. Griggs met them at the camp gate, silent and stiff. He looked at the unconscious Lane, then at Vexa's torn suit. She left. Without orders, one soldier said quickly. She also came back with the missing man. Jack snapped. Griggs didn't speak for a moment, then nodded. "Put him in recovery." He said, "We'll talk later." That night, the soldiers didn't sleep easy. Some watched Vexa from across the fire, still unsure. Others began to think the danger out there was bigger than they thought. Jack sat alone near the jungle edge, staring at the spiral mark on the recovered helmet. It glowed faintly under the moonlight, almost like it was alive. Something strange had touched Lane. Something Vexa hadn't fully explained, and as Jack watched the dark forest sway, he realized Vexa hadn't come back empty-handed. She had brought back a warning, and maybe, just maybe, a piece of the enemy too. No one was expecting her to return. Through the fog, the search had been called off an hour ago. The soldiers were told to rest, to forget the alien nurse who had vanished into the jungle. Griggs had already written Vex's name into the missing log. Even Jack, who believed in her more than anyone, had started to lose hope. But just before sunrise, the scanners chirped. Once, then went silent. Jack rushed to the control post, staring at the display. One life signal, moving slowly, coming from the ridge. The guards pointed their rifles as a figure walked into view. Her white medical coat was ripped, stained in mud and something darker. Over her shoulders hung the limp body of Private Lane. Still alive, barely breathing, Vexa didn't speak, didn't stumble. She carried him like he weighed nothing. Jack sprinted to her side, shouting her name, but she just kept walking until she reached the infirmary tent. Griggs arrived, eyes narrowed. "Where were you?" he asked sharply. Vexa looked at him for a long second, then finally spoke. "Beneath," she said. "We were beneath." The medics rushed to take Lane. He was dehydrated, bruised, and covered in a dust no one recognized. It clung to his skin, like silver ash. Inside the command tent, Griggs sat across from Vexa. Her face was blank, but her hands trembled slightly. Jack stood nearby, arms crossed, ready to speak if anyone accused her again. "I followed the creature into an underground chamber," Vexa explained. "There were markings, lights, like technology, but older. They kept Lane sedated, possibly studying him." Griggs asked, "Who are they?" Vexa hesitated, then whispered, "Not animals, not raiders. Something else." That word settled into the room like a stone dropped in water. The captain stood, walking over to the window. "This planet is supposed to be empty," he said quietly, "except for wildlife and the scattered raiders." Jack shook his head. "They knew Lane was human," he said. "They didn't kill him. They studied him outside the tent." The camp had changed. No one laughed, no one joked. Everyone looked over their shoulders. The jungle wasn't just jungle anymore, it was watching. Lane finally woke up near sunset. His eyes opened slowly, blinking against the harsh light. He didn't speak for a long time, just stared at the roof of the tent. When Jack came in, Lane finally turned his head. "There were voices," he said quietly. "Not words, just pressure, like something speaking straight into my mind." Jack leaned closer. "Did they hurt you?" Lane shook his head slowly. "No. They were curious. They didn't understand what I was." Griggs was informed immediately, and the news reached the entire squad within the hour. Suddenly, the enemy wasn't just an enemy. It was something ancient, hidden, and intelligent. Something watching from deep below the planet's crust. Vexa stood outside her tent as the second moon rose. Her fingers touched the side of her neck, where faint scars glowed under the night. She had seen tech like that chamber before, but never on this planet, and never still active. Jack approached her, holding 2 steaming cups of military coffee. "You saved him," he said. Offering one, Vexa took it silently, nodding once. Jack sat down beside her, staring at the stars. "You said beneath," he muttered. "How deep are we talking?" Vex's voice was barely above a whisper. "Too deep," she said. "Deeper than the scanners can reach." Jack didn't reply. The camp lights flickered once again, and from the far side of the fence, near the jungle edge, something howled. Not an animal, not a machine, something else, something that had also just woken up. The scream didn't sound human. It cut through the foggy night like a blade. Sharp and urgent. Then came the voice, broken and shaky over the coms. "This is Alira," she gasped. "I need help now." Inside the camp, soldiers froze. Eyes wide, hands gripping rifles. No one moved, not at first. Then someone said, "It's probably a trick." Another muttered, "She's an alien. She'll handle it." But Jack was already running. He didn't think. He didn't wait for orders. He just grabbed his flashlight, his weapon, and sprinted out into the darkness. The night was thick. The air wet and full of whispers from the trees. His boots pounded the ground faster and faster. A Lyra signal came from the north side of the jungle. Near the old rocks where the ground was soft and the vines grew like veins, he heard movement. A head heavy, crashing. Not her. He stopped, held his breath, then saw it. Something huge passed through the trees just meters ahead. It didn't walk, it floated, its shape shifted like smoke. And it had no eyes, just glowing lines all over. Its body, Jack stayed low, heart racing like a drum. Then he heard a second voice, faint and shaking. "Jack." "Behind you?" He spun and found her. Alira was half buried under fallen branches. Her arm twisted unnaturally. She looked up at him, sweat on her forehead. "It was fast," she whispered. "It didn't touch me. It just looked at me." He grabbed her. Pulled her free. She winced, but didn't scream. Whatever had attacked her wasn't far. The jungle was too quiet again. "Can you walk?" Jack asked. "I'll try," she answered, though her steps were weak. Suddenly, a soft hum filled the air. The same kind of hum Vexa used to heal. But this was deeper, colder, and coming from behind the trees. They turned just in time to see the creature again. This time, it had a shape tall, thin arms, too long. Its head turned slowly, as if smelling them through space itself. Jack raised his weapon, but Alira pulled his arm down. "No use," she said. "It doesn't fear bullets." Then she reached out with her working hand and touched the ground. The soil glowed briefly, and a wall of light erupted between them and the creature. The thing stopped, hissed, and backed away into the trees. Jack stared at the glowing field she had created. "You've had this kind of power all along?" he asked. She looked down, ashamed. "We're not just nurses," she admitted. "We were trained to protect, but we were told to hide it, back at the camp." Soldiers watched the forest from the walls. Some saw the brief flash of energy in the trees and gasped. Others said, that wasn't human tech. Rumors spread quickly. Jack had gone in alone. And now he was either dead or worse. But then the gates opened. And he returned, carrying Alira on his back. Both were scratched, dirty, but alive. He laid her gently near the medbay, and she looked up at him. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. Jack just smiled and replied, "You screamed like one of us." No one spoke. Not right away, but something changed in that moment. One man had risked his life for an alien, and one alien had dropped her secret to protect a man. That night, the nurses weren't locked in. They weren't watched with suspicion. Instead, many soldiers looked at them with quiet respect, still unsure, still afraid, but no longer blind. Far beyond the ridge, the creature watched from the shadows. It touched the spot where the energy field had blocked it, then slowly sank into the ground. Vanishing, it had tested the man, failed. But next time, it would not be alone, and when it came again, it would not be silent. The sky turned red before dawn, not from sunrise, but from the warning lights blinking across every monitor in the base. All systems began to flicker, screens glitched, alarms buzzed once, then died into static. Even the satellite dish spun wildly, like something was jamming the air itself. Jack ran into the control room just as the power failed. Was this another storm? He asked. No, Briggs answered, standing still as the backup lights turned on. This is something else. The radio cracked. Only once, a single message came through, a voice no one recognized. It wasn't human, and it didn't speak. In words it sang in frequencies, low and strange. Villari walked in, her face pale. She looked at the screen, then whispered, "It has started." Briggs stepped toward her, eyes sharp. "What do you mean it?" He asked. Villari looked at him, then at Jack. And for the first time since she arrived, she looked afraid. "We were not sent here only to heal," she began. "We were sent to observe human behavior in extreme environments, that much." "We guessed," Briggs replied coldly. But Villari shook her head. "There's more," she said. "We were also sent to monitor a signal buried deep under this planet's surface." Everyone stared at her, confused. "What signal?" Jack asked. Alira entered the room next, supporting Nyla, who was still recovering. "It's not a signal," Alira said. "It's a warning." They had kept the truth hidden for weeks. "Orders from above: do not interfere. Do not reveal the purpose. Do not connect too closely with the humans." But something had changed that. Something woke early. Villari tapped a device on her wrist, and a hidden screen projected into the air. A map of the planet with a red mark pulsing at the center. "A structure lies beneath the jungle, older than any recorded civilization," she explained. "It sends waves of memory and thought into the surface above, infecting the minds of sensitive species. That's why Cain forgot his name," Jack muttered. Villari nodded. "Human minds were never meant to be near this place," she said, "but we thought the signal would stay dormant." Nyla finally spoke, her voice cracked but clear. "It didn't stay dormant." She said, "It called something." The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. The pieces were fitting together now, but the picture was darker than they feared. Briggs crossed his arms. "So we're test subjects," he said. Villari nodded once. "We didn't agree with it. But we followed orders." Jack stepped forward, angry now. "You let our men go mad? You let them bleed, just to study us." Alira looked up at him with tired eyes. "We saved them when we could," she said. "But if we had acted too soon, command would have pulled us out. And then you would have faced it alone." Briggs walked toward the projection and pointed at the pulsing red dot. "Can we destroy it?" he asked. Villari frowned. "We don't even know what it really is," she said. "But we do know one thing." She turned to Jack, voice steady now. "It responds strongest to you." The room went silent. Jack blinked. "Confused? Me?" Nyla nodded. "When you entered the jungle to save Alira, the signal spiked when you touched the soil." It echoed back. Briggs didn't like the sound of that. "You're saying he's linked to it?" Villari looked down. "We don't know if it chose him or if he awakened it, but it knows him now." Jack didn't speak. He just stared at the red mark, pulsing like a heartbeat, and deep in the jungle, under the surface. Something pulsed back in time with it. Not metal, not bone, something between. And it was waking faster. The base stayed on lockdown that night, guards on every corner, weapons loaded. Alarms waiting to scream again, but Jack couldn't sleep. Because every time he closed his eyes, he saw the jungle, and in the center of it, something standing in the dark, waiting, smiling without a mouth. No new orders came from command, no rescue ships landed, no messages answered from orbit. The base had gone dark to the outside world. And the jungle kept whispering from all sides. For the first time, the human soldiers and alien nurses stood on the same side of fear. They were no longer separate teams. Just one group of people surrounded by something they couldn't understand. Jack stood at the edge of the clearing, staring out into the thick trees. His name still echoed inside the strange signal. He could feel it every night, like the jungle was calling him closer. The machine started acting strange. The weather sensor spun even when the air was still. The scanners showed shapes moving, shapes too big, too fast, and too quiet. Then came the final warning. Just before sunrise, the base shook, not like thunder, but like something huge had moved beneath them. Soldiers jumped from their bunks, rifles ready, shouting commands no one could hear over the rumble. Lights burst, the power grid fried again, and the sky turned a deep orange. The jungle cracked open in the distant trees, snapping like dry sticks. Something was rising from below the ground. Valerie stood in the middle of the chaos, eyes glowing. With panic, "This wasn't supposed to happen so soon," she whispered. Nyla stared at the scanners, her hands trembling. "It's not a creature," she said. "It's a construct, half alive, half machine." Lyra looked toward the human. Soldiers, her decision already made. She walked straight to Jack and handed him a small glowing device. "What's this?" he asked. "Our override key," she replied. "It can shut the construct down, but only from inside." Briggs stepped in, furious. "You're giving him alien tech," he barked. "He's not trained for this." Lyra met his eyes calmly. "He's the only one it listens to," she said. "The signal knows him now." Jack didn't hesitate. He strapped on his gear, slid the device into a pouch, and nodded. "I'll go," he said. "But I won't make it alone." Lyra stepped forward. "Then I'll go with you." Briggs raised his voice. "You can't. This is against your mission protocols." Lyra looked at him one last time. "So is letting people die." They entered the jungle together, side by side. The noise grew louder with each step, metal grinding, roots splitting, air buzzing like electricity. The ground opened into a wide crater. At the center, something ancient and terrible stood. It was tall like a tower, with arms of steel and flesh. Its head a spinning ring of symbols. It didn't move like a beast, but like something that had waited too long. Jack and Lyra climbed down without speaking. As they reached the center, the creature turned slow, deliberate. Jack felt his name inside his skull, whispered again and again. "Jack, Jack, Jack." He pulled out the override key, but his hands began to shake. The signal pushed into his brain like needles. His knees buckled, and then Lyra screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of power. She raised both hands, glowing brighter than ever before. Her body pulsed with a light no human had ever seen. The creature turned to her, stunned. "By her disobedience, you were built to serve," it seemed to say without speaking. "I choose to protect," she answered without fear. She pushed Jack aside and threw herself forward. Hands pressed against the construct's body. The light burst from her like a wave, blue and gold. Cracking the air, the machine screamed. Lights in its core flickering violently. Jack threw blurry eyes, saw the override key glow bright in his hand. He pressed it to the base of the creature's core. And everything stopped. The jungle went silent, the sky cleared. The machine froze, then collapsed into dust and metal. Lyra fell too, smoke rising from her arms, her body still glowing faintly. Jack crawled to her side, heart pounding. "Lyra," he whispered. She opened her eyes slowly. "I broke every rule," she said, almost smiling. Jack nodded. "Yeah," he replied, "and saved everyone." Back at the base, the signal ended. The scanners returned to normal. The jungle stopped whispering. Command finally responded. A rescue ship was on the way. But the real rescue had already happened, done by those who weren't supposed to interfere. Lyra was marked a traitor by Desasaur, by her own people, but in the hearts of the human soldiers, she was something far more. She was one of them, and from that day forward, every human who survived the Vorta mission told the same story. The day an alien nurse broke the rules and changed the war forever.